Hey y'all, what is going on? What is going on? It's your girl, Melba Pearson, Melba for Miami, Melba for Justice, also known as the resident legal diva, and it is time for another Mondays with Melba. So today is Indigenous Peoples Day. We may have grown up knowing this as Columbus Day. But as we grow and as we evolve and as we understand more about history, especially the hidden history that we have not always been taught or has been discussed widely, we have learned that it is a much better way to honor the people that originally lived on this land that were not found or discovered, because you can't discover folks that already live in a place, right? And we want to make sure that in honoring Indigenous Peoples Day, we learn more about the different Indigenous peoples that live in our country and the lands that we occupy, right? Because again, these were Indigenous lands that were taken away from the people in order to, basically further colonization, which is, we all know my opinions on that. I've been very vocal about, issues of equity and making sure that we are recognizing the true history of this country, the good, the bad, the ugly, so that we make sure it does not happen again. So with that, I am so deeply honored to have two amazing folks to talk to us today, Chairman Robert Rosa and Mrs. Betty Osceola. So Chairman Rosa and Mrs. Osceola, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this special Mondays with Melba.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So I will start with you, Mrs. Osceola. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, the people you represent, and just a little bit about the work that you have been engaged in the last few years?
Well, thank you for letting me share some passions that we have as Indigenous people. But my name is Betty Osceola. I'm a member of the Miccosukee tribe of Indians of Florida and of the Panther Clan. And, you know, being Miccosukee is about your culture, your traditions, and how we need to exist in this environment that we inhabit. So, as a tribal member and also as an individual that has been an educator in our tribe, who currently I sit on the tribe's Everglades Advisory Committee. And through my business as an airboat tour operator, I use that opportunity to educate and advocate for the protection of our homelands, the greater Everglades system. And because in order to exist as a people, we have to have a place to exist, to be able to practice our customs and our traditions. And uh, through that advocacy, I've been advocating for to stop that continued pollution of our the waters in our reservation lands and outside of our reservation lands, to further get the indigenous voice, because too many years have gone by where the Miccosukee, the agencies, whether state, federal, local, would not give us a seat at the table to express our concerns. And even if we did get an opportunity to speak, they would discredit what we had to say, ignore what we had to say in formulating those policies, even though we are the actual inhabitants of the greater Everglades ecosystem. And through that advocacy, myself and also the tribe advocating for their right as a sovereign nation to have say so over their homelands, because we're surrounded by Collier County, Miami-Dade County, Broward County, Hendry County, all these different municipalities around us, and their decision impacting our homelands. Myself and the tribe has been speaking out more in the recent years because the environment in which we live, our water quality is very poor. The natural wildlife, the flora and fauna of the Everglades system is not thriving, and we're seeing that we're having to be stronger advocates to get these other entities to listen to us. And I'm also big on, because I'm big on culture and our traditions, I also advocate for the protection of those resources that we need to utilize in our day-to-day lives and our ceremonies, but also advocate for the protection of the ancestors. A lot of times you have development in the other areas. For example, Miami-Dade County, we have a development that's going in that's right over burial grounds. We have a development potentially going in Jupiter, and where they want to put up these shops and um, restaurants and residential area right over, another burial mound. So, and even the EAA reservoir, the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir that they're advocating to build, and it is under construction. Inside that reservoir are two burial mounds. So a lot of things are
Wow.
going on that impacts our people, and unfortunately, even into 2023, the study of indigenous people and their ancestors, their bones, is legal. So we call it legal grave robbery because for whatever reason, individuals don't equate the bones of indigenous people as bones, skeletons of indigenous people. They're classified as artifacts, something to be studied, something to be dug up, something to be, which is going on now, cut up and analyzed for their DNA. And but you don't see that happening to other cultures of people. And we've been trying, myself along with Robert and even the tribe itself, trying to advocate, the respect for our people, because what other cultures, is it okay for someone to go into a cemetery in Miami-Dade County and start digging up people and cut up their bones to study their DNA? I think Miami would be outraged, but they're not outraged when it comes to the indigenous people's ancestors. And unfortunately, in today's mindset, we keep seeing it more and more where, well, that's a part of history. Today, we're in the new age and history doesn't matter to a place. And that's a part, and the erasure of the indigenous footprint here in Florida and other parts of the United States and the world for that matter. It seems that, when it comes to indigenous people in other cultures, our history doesn't matter. And those are and through being an airboat captain, some people are like, how does an airboat captain educate about the Everglades? Well, the Everglades is my classroom and I'm a former teacher. So
Yeah.
it's taking the individuals into the environment, explaining the Everglades ecosystem and the Miccosukie's way of life and our connection to that ecosystem. I have a captive audience because to get back to shore, they depend on me to get them back to shore. So they have to listen to what I have to say. And right. But also, I'm not really, I was never into public speaking, but I realized I have to put that aside and do public speaking. And out of that evolved appearances in different documentaries and specials on television to get that broader message out to a bigger audience, not just local, but to get that message out to the world. Because the more voices that hear about an issue, the more your ability is to get legislation change, the more your ability is to get support from other people. And one of the things that we're currently in progress with, one of my nephews is spearheading a walk across the Everglades over a period of time, once a month, the second Saturday of every month, to educate the public about Florida's wanting to use radioactive material to resurface roadways in Florida. They passed a bill past legislative cycle to study the usage of radioactive waste that is produced by Mosaic, who mines for phosphorus, and through their process of processing the phosphorus for agricultural use, their byproduct is very radioactive. That's why they have those gypsum stacks in Tampa, because you can't do anything else with it. So to continue their industry, they've convinced the Tallahassee legislature that that byproduct that is very radioactive and cancerous, to use it in roadways. So they're trying to get it passed where FDOT, when they resurface and build these roads, they're going to use that radioactive waste. And we're trying to educate the public about what's going on, because the majority of the public does not realize that's down the future. Mm-hmm. So that's some of the things I've been working on.
Miss Osceola, thank you so much for that. I mean, as you were talking, what just struck me was, number one, I was thinking about Henrietta Lacks, who is, a Black woman who basically they took her cells and used her, basically her body, for all kinds of medical research. And it only took her descendants to be able to fight to say, listen, you have to stop experimenting with our relative, right? Like that's not, she didn't give permission. She didn't give consent. This was not part of a study she willingly agreed to. She was literally, they took her being and used that for science. So I was thinking about that. And then I'm also thinking about that movement to return basically looted artifacts by, different museums from all around the world are starting to get these demand letters from different tribes in different countries saying, hey, you stole our stuff. Okay. That, mask or that, important artifact, you didn't ask permission from the people to take it. You robbed it from the land and now you display it in museums and charge money for it. We would like our stuff back. So, and I know I'm not trying to trivialize it by saying stuff, but the reality is these are important artifacts to a culture that has been, in some ways just reduced to almost just like a circus, and that's not okay. So when I hear the struggles of, the respect for the ancestors and for their resting place, that to me was it's just very disturbing. But I'm going to turn to you, Chairman Rosa. Same question. Introduce yourself, please, and share a bit about the work that you've been doing, especially in terms of the respect for the remains of the ancestors.
Highway. I'm Taino, first of all. My name is Robert Rosa. I am with the United Confederation of Taino People, as well as chairman for the American Indian Movement. We've been working on an array of projects from the environment all the way to the burials, and neither one is less important than the other. We try to distribute our time and our people throughout Florida to protect all these sites. Currently, there is Brickell, there is Jupiter, and there is Enclo. All of them were marked burials. There wasn't one site that didn't have a master file on it. And we are all out there. And let me just say that even Miss Betty Osceola is out there, and that kind of violates her traditions. I just want you to know that's how important the issue is, she's going against tradition to try to protect something that is sacred. And
actually, Chairman Rosa, can I interrupt you for 1 second? Could you please explain, how this goes against tradition and so what the tradition is, how it goes against it, just so that the viewers have a better understanding of how important this is?
Yeah, I would let Betty speak on that. That's her traditions, and that I would have to refer that to Betty.
Thank you. In my culture, the only time we're supposed to speak about death is during a mourning period. We're not supposed to speak about death or have any interactions of going to a burial grounds or a cemetery outside of the time of that process to lay a loved one to rest. And in doing so, and even speaking about those issues, it brings a personal, I guess it's bad luck, and eventually we'll get health issues as a part of that. And so that's why tribes, when they're asked for their comment on these kind of situations, they try to very tactfully say their stance without getting too involved. And a lot of times the public takes that for consent. But throughout time, just like one of my relatives who's no longer with us was an advocate for protection of the ancestors, even though he knew all that was going to occur. So for me, advocating and attending these meetings to stop the development of these sacred sites, and even engaging in conversations to have these sacred items, our people, and these objects returned, is very outside of our cultural norm. So, but I myself made that personal decision to put my health and my life on the line to protect the ancestors and my people. But not every tribal member would do that. That's what he's talking about, going against tradition, is that I made that decision to sacrifice my own health and well-being for that of my tribe and the ancestors.
Okay, that just gave me chills. Sorry. that just literally gave me chills. Because I'm just thinking about, and I'm going to go back to you so I can compose myself. And no, this is not being edited out. Like, this is like real time. This is just, because I'm just thinking about the Black Lives Matter movement. I think about, Eric Garner's daughter who passed away a year or so later after his death because she was out there advocating for justice for her father. So it's just another reminder, your tribe figured it out way before we did, but sort of the mental health aspect and the preservation aspect about, while advocating is important, it does take that toll. So how do you preserve that balance? So thank you for that explanation. Chairman Rosa, back to you.
So yeah, there's a lot entailed. The laws are against us as they always have been. We are moving forward to try to change these laws. One, for example, is notification. Due notification for them, it could simply be putting it in the newspaper, or emailing when they do find remains, because there is NAGPRA that is applied. But the archaeologists tell their own story when us native people have our own stories. For example, Taino, we've been here forever, and it's just been since science came, and they're like, oh yeah, you guys really do live. And also the trade aspect. We've been trading with Florida for eons, thousands of years, but the archaeologist doesn't want to acknowledge that. We've been going back and forth, between the Miccosukee coming to the Caribbean and the Caribbean coming up here, and we've walked these lands together, and we've honored their land, they've honored our lands, and the archaeologists want to come up with their own stories so they could continue the looting and the disrespect that remains. When I say that, I mean, for example, they would say it's prehistoric, meaning before Seminoles. Seminoles, it took a long time for a lot of lawmakers and a lot of people to realize that, the Seminoles have been on this land, the Miccosukee have been on this land, and they're all one people. This is their sacred items. This is their remains. And now, it's becoming more easy for them to get their items. But then they made a new law which states they could hold the remains for up to 8 years to study the DNA. And like Miss Betty said, what other culture in the world, besides Africa, is that allowed? It doesn't happen. So these are the things that we're up against. These are the things that we're moving forward on trying to change. And the more the news gets out there throughout the world, the more help we'll get. And we get help from Indigenous people. We get help from politicians. We get help from allies, but it just doesn't seem enough at times. So it's an ongoing battle, not only for burial sites, not only for sacred items that are in museums and remains that are in museums. It also has to do with the environment. We've been here longer than 500 years that colonizers been here, and they've destroyed the place already. And I don't know what to say. We keep telling them, they know our ways. They've heard our ways. They just don't care about our ways. They care to capitalize and get the most money out of sacred items, out of remains, and out of the environment, and without any lack of human dignity, respect, or honor to anybody. I mean, black, brown, white, they don't care. They are polluting the lands, like Miss Betty said. You got Mosaic with the radioactive waste. Why are they allowed to use it? Because the EPA has not classified that as a hazardous waste. So that is another law that needs to be changed. But we can't do it without the support. We can't do it without the help of everybody. This affects everybody. Because what they do to us, it's already proven. What they do to us, they'll eventually do to the other people.
Exactly. I mean, couldn't think of a better way to say it myself. I mean, we're looking at issues of the environment. I mean, if you care about, having clean water to be able to drink or to be able to enjoy the natural beauty that's here in the state, preservation's important. When you think about, honoring the ancestors, right? The same way you'd want your own ancestors to be honored and be able to literally rest in peace, the same has to apply for all peoples, not just the some, but for all, right? And that everyone is able to live in peace and harmony and dignity and live, the life according to their traditions. That, again, is supposed to be the American way, but somehow we're losing our way on that. So I have a couple questions before we wrap up. First off, Chairman Rosa, I know that you are Taino, and there is a huge connection between the Taino people here in Florida and the Taino people in the Caribbean. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I was like, this years old when I learned that the Arawak Indians in Jamaica, of which I'm half Jamaican, half Trinidadian, they have a very strong connection with the Taino people, and there may actually be a relationship there, like blood. So I'm definitely curious just to know that, because I know there's a lot of Caribbean folks who may not know this history, or even just folks in general.
Well, yeah, like I said, they've just proven everything that our grandfathers told us. Through DNA, yeah, we're still here. Of course that, they didn't need DNA for that. We've been saying it. And like I said, there's been trade back and forth. There was a village when all the colonization came, the Calusa took us in, and there was a Taino village out there. But we were good relations. We were good neighbors. And Miss Betty will tell you that, she's got stories from when her people went down to, in fact, Jamaica and other, Cuba and other islands. So this is a relationship that's been going on for thousands of years. And it's rekindling. It's bringing everything back together. And it's also the prophecy of the eagle and the condor, which means, the Southern Indians and the Northern Indians reuniting to make a great change in the world.
Y'all give me chills today. Just, whew, okay. Miss Osceola, can you talk a little bit about the relationship of the Miccosukis and sort of how that interplayed with, different locations in the Caribbean as well as in Florida?
Our stories tell us that before this land was settled and was the United States, in the earlier days, our people traveled historically to the area known as the New York State, all the way up to the New York area, all the way down into Florida. So we traveled with the seasons. We were migratory. And when food wasn't available here, like right now, the Everglades is all flooded, so it's hard to find food. And so we would travel to further up north, or even hunted buffalo back in the day. So, historically, you don't have buffalo this far south near Miami area of the Everglades. And during those times of travel, we have ceremonies, and where the different tribes from this continent would get together different times of the year to have ceremony, but also to bring items to trade. And if you look back further in history, and me and myself meeting people who are Nawa, they're referred to as Aztecs today, their stories intersecting with ours of how their people traveled here to Florida, also on trade routes. And where the Miami Circle is there in Miami was one area where people gathered for trade. And even the Aztec people, the Nahuatl people, acknowledged that their ancestors also came to Florida to trade. And archaeologists, even though I don't agree with what they do, but even through their excavations, have found different materials here in Florida. Some of that coming from the Taino people, some of that coming from, the Mayan and Aztec people, that there's no explanation of how they would be found here in Florida if it wasn't for trade and people coming together. And you don't see it as much today. I mean, we're still boat people. We went from traversing the Everglades and across the coast of Florida from the dugout canoes. We used to build just like you see the Polynesians have the double hull canoes, almost like a catamaran. We built the same things, and we would travel down to the coastal islands off of Florida and through to Cuba, and also to some of the other barrier islands close to Jamaica and the Bahamas. And I forgot exactly which the name of the island. Back in the 90s, the Seminole tribe of Florida made a visit to one of those islands to acknowledge some of their ancestors, because the people of those islands were able to prove that they were descendants of the Seminole people, the Seminoles that during the times of the wars escaped by traveling on those canoes to the different islands. So a lot of Seminoles went to escape the colonists, the soldiers here, from being killed, and heading towards Cuba and to these other islands to survive. So, but for some reason, historians and archaeologists don't want to acknowledge that we traveled. We were seafaring people as well. And fortunately, even the Hawaiians, when we met them a few years back, when they were on their maiden voyage with the Hukalea, they spent 20 years building the double hull canoe, and also took almost 20 years to be ready because they navigated the world by the stars. And that was something that was lost to their people, but they found another tribe that had individuals that knew that knowledge. So it took them a long time, and sending different crews to relearn that knowledge to build their canoe. And they proved that in their stories, also told them that they once lived here in Florida with us. And we had similar stories that the Hawaiians lived here with us, and one day we would see each other again. So that happened a few years back when they landed here on the coast of Florida, and the two tribes welcomed them, and we exchanged our stories that we were boat people. And so, but we're telling our stories. But unfortunately, if a scientist doesn't say it actually happened, if an archaeologist doesn't say it actually happened, mainstream society doesn't want to believe our stories. But we know they're true. We know that the Tainos, we had interaction with them. Even some of the places here in Florida, the different names for them, up in the Tampa area, you had the Tocobacan people. we have stories that say that those villages were actually a village of an individual. Because our culture, when a village is established, is usually the head person of that village would be called by that person's name. So we have stories in the Tampa area that, there was an individual named Tokopachi, but Tabagan people evolved out of that. We're like, no, that village was, Tokopachi lived there. That was his village. And that's the people that came from that village said they were from the Tokopachi village. But the colonists that came afterwards started talking about the Tabagan people. We're like, no, they're our ancestors. They were just lived at the camp of Tokopachi. So here we're trying to tell our stories, but people in their journals and that being read today as taken as truth written by people who are not of our people is what history is being taught, instead of the history as it's related coming from the actual people themselves. So some of these tribal names were actually names of different people of our ancestors. Kind of like what you're having of, I think I was reading something where they
Thank
I'm like, how do you rediscover somebody when they're descendants of these people and you just thought they died out? But apparently, since scientists were able to prove through DNA these people still existed, the article was, they rediscovered them. I'm like, they never went away. You just know they never went away. They were always here. So it's things like that we're trying to tell our history. I'm like, we're the ones telling our story. Listen to the people who are still here today telling their stories. Why does it still have to be where some person from academia has to say it's true before anybody takes our truth?
Yeah. Thank you for that, Miss Osceola. Thank you so much for that. So my final question to the two of you, if folks want to get more involved, they want to learn more, they want to support, whether it be through donations or showing up or writing letters or, holding the line with you, whatever it is, how can they learn more? What organization should they follow? What social media page should they follow? And just for everybody watching, I will drop any resources mentioned in the comments or in the body of the description so that you can follow up later on. So Chairman Rosa, I'll start with you and then I'll end with you, Mrs. Osceola.
Yeah, my email is aimcentralfl@gmail.com. You could message me anytime. We also on Facebook, and we post most of our events on Facebook and Twitter, as well as Instagram. Yeah, just reach out, and you could find us through the internet, and as many people have. I'm more than open to have anybody who comes in a good way.
Thank you, Chairman. Mrs. Osceola?
Yeah, for myself, I have a Facebook page and I have an Instagram page. I do have Twitter, but I don't post to Twitter that much. And I have a TikTok page. I generally post a lot on my personal pages for whether it's environment or for it has to deal with historic preservation. And usually when we're going to have these different if we're going to have walks, if we're going to attend a meeting, and we try to create an event for that to get people to show up. And tomorrow is a meeting in Miami in regards to 4-4 Brickell, and which I hope members of the public who live in Miami would attend that meeting to hear what's going on. Next month, the walk to continue to educate about the radioactive waste that they're considering to use on the Florida highways. The next upcoming prayer walk is October 14th, which is the second Saturday. We welcome people, if you can't walk, to support by maybe donating snacks. Or we ask people if they can volunteer their time to be a support vehicle. The support vehicles are very important because they carry our supplies of, snacks, water, or somebody is walking and the heat is too much, so that they can ride in a vehicle. At the end of the walk, we close out in prayer and we feed everyone. Last event, a gentleman up near the Tampa area drove all the way down with the meal he had prepared to feed the walkers. So you can support in that way as well. And also contact your state legislature and your local representatives, regardless of what radioactive materials on Florida highways is going to hit every county. So regardless of where you live and what county you live, contact your local representatives and your state representative for your area that you don't want radioactive materials to be used to construct roads. That impacts everyone, regardless of your where you live, your social economic standing and income. It's going to impact all of us. And also too, like in Miami-Dade County, there's a discussion of building a water park on the last remaining pine rocklands. If that's developed, then it disappears. You're not going to have any more. So even that vote has been deferred to December. If you live in the Jupiter area, get involved and follow. I believe they have a Facebook page for that area through the Jupiter Lighthouse, or Saving Jupiter, I think it's called. But especially, Robert's personal page and my personal page, we usually post about what's going on. And also too, Robert and another gentleman created an event for the Antelope Park. I think it's October 9th, correct?
Correct. Antelope Park. Correct.
Yeah. If you're up in that area and have the time, visit to hear what they have to say, because that's another area of registered area trying to